Hi, welcome to Making the Most of Chromebooks in the K-1 classroom. Presented by Stacy M., a kindergarten teacher, and Sarah C., first grade teacher at Herbert Primary School. We'll begin by talking about how to organize and set up your classroom devices. Organizing and setting up your classroom devices is probably the most overwhelming thing when you learn that you're going to be having one-to-one technology. There are some things that you want to think about. Your storage. Where will you keep the devices? How will you charge the devices daily? So you want to think about your method of storage. Will your district be giving you a Chromebook cart? Will it need to be plugged in? Will you need to be able to pull it out and push it back to where it needs to be every day? Will you be having shelves? Will you be having individual plugs? Think about all of that and determine the best location to store your devices. You want the location to be easily accessible for both the teacher and students. Kindergarten and first grade students learn quickly, so you may start by the teacher having the most responsibility, and then you could start training students to develop that on their own so that they can access their devices on their own. Labeling is huge. Labels are your friends. The more labels, the better. You want to number the devices and number the shelves. This way, younger students can easily see where their device belongs. They can match the numbers together and put it away on their own. It is helpful to label with student names on the outside of the computer facing you, so when you put the Chromebooks away, they can see their number and name. And it's helpful to label with the student passwords on the inside of the Chromebook. This way, when they open it up, their password's right there, and they don't have to look for a different location to find their password. Planning a classroom technology routine. As you know, with younger students, routine is very important. You want to think about how you want your students to take out the devices. Do you want the same students to get them out each time and pass them out? Do you want each student to be able to grab their own device and go back to their seats? How do you want the students to put them away? How should your students carry the devices? How will your students get their headphones or mouse? And what do you want them to do when they have the device? So, one of the ways that this can be handled is to develop a routine that every time you need to get your devices, you follow. My students, it worked very well to call them in groups. They lined up in a single file line, one at a time, to pull their devices. I did not have them get a mouse right away. I taught my students how to use the mouse pad on their Chromebook, but some teachers do like them to have a mouse pad or a mouse that they can plug in. So if you want them to grab that and grab their headphones, take everything with them to their desk, that's a good idea. I had my students get their devices, put it on their desk, and then get their headphones. I also taught them how to log in as soon as they got their devices back to their desks and put their hands on their head so I know that they're ready for instructions. Introducing the routine. Once you have the routine planned out, then you obviously need to introduce it to your classroom. You need to model and practice until this is done in a way that you're happy. You want to show students where the devices will be stored. You need to break it down into tiny steps. Show them how to take the devices out, how to put them back. What are the expectations? Can they just put it on any shelf? Does it have to go on a specific shelf? Can they put them in any direction, or does it have to be put in a specific direction? You need to show them how they'll carry the device and accessories, because they will try to carry everything all at once. Do you want them to hold the Chromebook with just one hand? They will try that. If you want them to hug the device against their chest, you'll have to show them how to do that. If you want them to hold it with two hands, you'll have to show them how to do that. Then you can show them where to put the headphones and mice so they can walk to their seat. Practice this until you're happy with the results. What they develop as a routine is what they will do every time they go to get their devices. So if you want something to be done a specific way, spend time practicing until you're happy with the results. This will save you time in the future. Once students are at their seats, you need to show them how to plug in their headphones and mice and what to do with their headphones and mice once they've done that. Do you want them to keep the headphones on their ears? Do you want them to put it down on their neck so they can hear directions? Do you want them playing with the mouse, or do you want them to have their hands in their laps? Show them how to log in. Remember, it's helpful to have a label with your login information on the inside of the Chromebook. That way they don't have to look for it. Show students how to navigate to the district portal or your Google Classroom. This is important. You want them to be able to follow a few steps to get to where they need to be in order for you to give them directions. Show them how to log out of the device and practice these steps until students can do them all independently. This is something that takes a lot of time in the beginning of the year, but by the middle of the year, students are able to do it independently, and it makes things run a lot smoother and faster. Teaching technology content. So you'll find that you have to teach the basic vocabulary to your students before they can do what you expect them to do. You'll have to show them what a cursor is. You'll have to show them where the backspace or delete button is and explain what that means. You'll have to show them where the enter button is. It might be helpful to put a small sticker on these buttons so that they can easily locate them on the keyboard. You want to show them how to close out of a screen and how to log off. You'll need to teach your students how to left and right click, how to move the cursor, and how to scroll up and down. These are just the basics for helping them to use computer programs. It's also really important that when you're doing this, you're keeping it in your own vocabulary. So if you are telling them to log out of a screen or close out of a screen, if you say X out on a regular basis, then you want to teach them what X out means instead of close out. So use what you use on a daily basis, but explain it to them so they understand what that vocabulary means. Typing is something that many people think is going to be too overwhelming for a younger student. But typing is great for phonemic awareness. It is great for letter recognition and identification. Use it to your advantage as you're teaching letter identification and sounds. Then you may use the keyboard to help you to solidify that information. For typing, you want to focus on the basics, the keyboard layout, and then you want to utilize free typing programs. Sarah C. is now going to take over and talk about the Google Classroom.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I will be continuing the presentation on how to make the most of Chromebooks in the K-1 classroom. I'll be discussing Google Classroom. I start using Google Classroom from day one as a way to communicate with not only my students, but also with my parents. I encourage them to download the app on their phone or to access it at home so that they're aware of what their students are working on and they can access any information I post for them. I'm going to take a break from the presentation and head over to Google Classroom itself. You'll come to classroom.google.com to get your classroom started. You hit the plus button and you choose Create Class. You'll need to name it and hit the word Create. Once it's finished loading, you'll have something that looks like this and your class is created. This is what's called the stream. Think of this as a feed on Facebook or Instagram where the most recent things that have happened all appear here. You can see that I've recently posted some materials for my students. This is also where you can write an announcement to your students. You can add attachments if you need to, maybe a flyer that goes along with whatever you're discussing. And the nice thing about everything on Google Classroom is that it gives you the opportunity to schedule. Especially with distance learning, our schedules are not as regular as they were in the classroom. And so I love the fact that whenever I have time to work on my schoolwork, I can do what I need to do and know that it will post when it needs to be there for my students. Another great area is classwork. This is where I send my students the majority of the time because I can create these topics to keep everything organized. You simply have to hit create, topic, and then you name it. You can drag and drop your topics until they're in the order that you want, and then you can start adding things to each one. I like to have a topic called websites for things like ABC or Starfall. This way my students just have to know how to navigate to Classroom, and then I can quickly send them to whatever websites I might want them to use that day. I usually have a topic for each subject so that nothing gets too cluttered. And then I even have subjects like newsletter or about the classroom that has information that's important for parents to know. You can see that I've posted a few things. This little symbol here means that it's a material. When the student clicks on it, they can click on the link because this is a website, or the parents can click on the file because this is a newsletter. But it isn't telling them that they need to turn anything in. It's simply there for their reference. Here you see an assignment. I don't have a due date, but I do have it turned in. I also have it scheduled to appear tomorrow. I wanted you to see what it looked like when something is scheduled. It's grayed out so that you know it's in there, but it hasn't been shared with your students yet. When creating an assignment, you have a number of options. You can put the instructions here. You can add files, links, files from your desktop, or YouTube videos easily. When you share a file with your students, you have a few options. It can be something just for them to see, something you want them to edit, but you need to be careful because this allows all of the students to edit the same file at the same time. Or you can make a copy for every student. This way they can move objects, they can fill in blanks and do their work, and every student's turning in, it's like their own worksheet. Over here you have a number of great options as well. You can select which students will get the work. This is a wonderful tool for differentiation. I'm able to give different word work to each of my reading groups, and my students who are a little self-conscious don't have to feel uncomfortable because nobody knows that they're doing something different. They all get word work tailored to their needs, and nothing is ever drawn attention. I can choose how many points. In K1, I generally don't grade, but with working from home, we've had to start grading. And so we use a 3-point grading scale. So I can change it to 3 points, or maybe I just want it to be a quiz, a short grade worth 10 points. You can choose a due date or no due date, and then you can choose the topic. If you change your mind about what topic you want it to be in, you can always just drag it and drop it to the right place. And then right now you see that it's scheduled. If I want to change, maybe I don't want it on the 8th, I need it to show up on the 10th on Friday. It's very easy. I hit schedule and everything is saved. Using all of this allows me to post whatever I need to in Google Classroom. My students and my parents have just one place to go, and they have everything that they need. I'm going to go through a few more details about Google Classroom, and then we'll move forward to some troubleshooting because that's an important skill as well. So I went through how to get started. As you're linking things to your classroom, take a look at the curriculum your school has purchased. I know our math curriculum is great. I can assign something in the math website, it appears in Google Classroom, and it allows me to make use of this curriculum that my district is paid for without confusing parents by sending them to multiple different sites. As you're linking things to your classroom, you need to double check your district's list of approved sites. Even some of the best websites out there have privacy policies that you need to be aware of, so make sure everything is district approved before you send students. And then I also discussed why I love the scheduling feature. In addition to using it for students, I shared that I put information for parents as well. I even include things like my specials, schedules, or upcoming events. And it's also a great resource for colleagues. I'm in a number of Google Classrooms where it's colleagues sharing ideas and resources with one another so that we can collaborate even if we aren't together. Next is problem solving. I'm going to go quickly through these slides, but I'm hoping that you can return to them as a resource so that if something happens and you need to walk your parents through how to use these devices, or once we return to school, you run into problems yourself, you can come back to them and use them when you need. The first thing you need to do is try to get as informed as possible about your district's policy and procedures. Is there somewhere you can go to get troubleshooting or a handbook for yourself or for your families? Are there extra devices available, and when is it okay to borrow them? That's more applicable for when we're in the building. Right now, I would say find out what happens if a family needs a new device. How can you arrange that for them? Is there a contact person in your building, or do you go straight to your tech department when you have concerns? How do you submit a work order? And now, how do you submit a work order on behalf of parents? Or do they do it themselves? And finally, you need to know the procedures when a student joins your class or leaves your class. Who's in charge of informing the tech department? And what steps do you need to take in order to acquire a new device or to return a device that's no longer needed? One of the most common concerns is that your camera doesn't work. I want to really stress that these are the steps recommended by Google. Number 3 and number 4, you absolutely should not do without district approval. These are things that can't be undone. The next is that sound doesn't work. I will add my own note that most of the time when my students tell me they can't hear something, it isn't actually the Chromebook, it's usually the headphones. So it is more than worth your time to spend a lot of time teaching the headphone procedures and appropriate headphone care, because families don't want to buy another pair of $20 or $30 headphones halfway through the year. So the better you can teach your students to take care of the headphones, the less likely you'll have sound problems as the year goes on. Next are some silly things that my students have figured out how to do, like rotating the screen or zooming in half of the screen. So now you know the steps to correct it. Some other things is the shelf where all their icons are might be moved and the desktop picture might be changed. This might be something that isn't a problem that you allow your students to change, but if it's making it difficult for them to operate their computer, or if they're choosing something that's not school appropriate, you might want to help them adjust it. And finally, here are some web resources that should be kept up to date. They're all affiliated with Google themselves. I know many times when I Google a problem, I find many hits that are a bit outdated and don't apply to this version of Chromebooks. So by using these websites, you're sure to have the most up-to-date information.